The firelight flickered unevenly, casting long shadows on the gathered faces around the makeshift camp. I cleared my throat, feeling the familiar weight of their attention. So I began, my voice dripping with the usual sardonic flair. Our water supply is like that soap opera villain, just when you think it's gone for good, it somehow bubbles back up, ready to drown us all in melodrama. A few chuckles broke the oppressive silence, the kind born not just of humor, but of desperate hope. It was a throwaway line, one of many tossed into the void to keep our spirits afloat. But the next morning, Elliot Crane approached me with a new edge to his usual nervous energy. His glasses were fogged, and his fingers shook slightly as he handed me a hastily scribbled note. "Max," he said, voice trembling, "I think your joke. It's more than just a joke, it's a warning. The water supply systems are failing structurally, and the pattern you joked about matches the signs I've been seeing." I blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. Elliot, with his grease-stained clothes and perpetually smudged glasses, usually brought a comforting eccentricity to our ragtag group, but this time, his earnestness was a hammer blow to any levity I'd tried to foster. The community gathered soon after, the air thick with a mixture of skepticism and growing dread. Some eyed me with a new wariness, others clung to the hope embedded in my words, hoping that if the joke was true, at least we had time to prepare. Lena found me later by the cracked remains of an old radio, her brow furrowed beneath the practical lines of her face. "Max," she said quietly, "this isn't just about jokes anymore. People are scared, and your humor, it's starting to feel like a prophecy. We need you to be careful." I wanted to laugh it off, to deflect with a quip about how the apocalypse was the universe's cruelest heckler. But beneath the sarcasm, a gnawing self-doubt crept in. Was I inadvertently scripting our fate? Or were we all just grasping for meaning in chaos? Meanwhile, Marcus Vell, the leader of the Silence, saw opportunity in the fissures forming within our fragile society. Clad in his black cloak, his cold voice echoed through the community gatherings. "This so-called prophecy," he spat, "is but another distraction from the order we desperately need. Max's humor is chaos masquerading as wisdom. We cannot survive on jokes alone." His words fanned the flames of division. Some survivors rallied behind him, fearing the unpredictability Max embodied. Others, still clutching to the thread of hope woven through my humor, stood their ground. Joan Jokes Harris tried to lighten the mood with her usual banter, but even her misfired attempts at wit couldn't bridge the growing chasm. The community was fracturing, caught between the absurdity of laughter and the grim reality of survival. As night fell, I lay awake beneath the dark canopy of a starless sky, the echo of my joke reverberating in my mind. Had I crossed a line? Was I a mere entertainer, or had I become something more, an unwitting prophet of doom? The silence outside pressed in, heavier than ever, and somewhere in that oppressive quiet, the line between comedy and fate blurred irrevocably. I shifted, the worn leather of my jacket creaking softly. Tomorrow, the community would have to choose to embrace hope in laughter or to surrender to the cold certainty of fear. And me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to be the punchline or the prophecy. But if there was one thing I knew, it was that in this scorched world, even the darkest joke could carry a flicker of truth. And maybe, just maybe, that flicker was all we had left. I had always known comedy carried its own weight, but I never imagined it could split a community like a fault line cutting through cracked concrete. The joke, which started as nothing more than a wry observation about the futility of our survival tactics, had somehow been twisted into prophecy. Suddenly, the laughter it once sparked had curdled into something else entirely: fear. It was a grey morning, the kind where the sun barely bothered to rise above the ash-choked horizon, casting a pall over the makeshift hall where we gathered. The survivors were restless, their faces etched with lines deeper than what the apocalypse had carved on the world outside. Some clutched at hope like a lifeline. Others wore suspicion like armor. I stood at the center, the worn leather jacket heavy on my shoulders, the familiar faded tea beneath it, a threadbare reminder of a life before. My voice felt foreign in the thick air as I tried to clarify what I'd meant. "Look, it was just a joke," I said, attempting to inject some of the dry wit that had always been my refuge. A punchline about how we might all be better off if we stopped pretending the future was anything but a bad rerun. But the words fell flat. They had already taken on a life of their own. Elliot, ever the tinkerer and prophet in training, had pored over the joke's layers, convinced it contained hidden warnings encoded in humor's absurd logic. He paced nearby, spectacles slipping down his nose, muttering about cycles and fate. Lena, her pragmatic eyes scanning the room, pulled me aside when the meeting erupted into shouting matches. "Max," she said quietly, her voice both steady and strained, "people are scared. They want certainty, not riddles disguised as laughs. You have to give them something real to hold on to." Her words sank in deeper than any punchline. I realized then how my sarcasm, once a shield against despair, had become a double-edged sword. The community was fracturing, the hopeful clinging to the joke's prophecy as a guide, the skeptical accusing it of inciting panic. Amid this turmoil, Marcus Vell's faction, the embodiment of the silence, loomed larger than ever. Their cold, shadowed figures appeared at the edges of our gatherings, their presence a silent reminder that control was their weapon and order their creed. They demanded I renounce the prophecy, warning that such talk endangered us all. In the quiet moments alone, I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance like mocking spirits. The weight of leadership pressed down harder than ever, the loneliness of it folding around me like a suffocating cloak. Was I a savior or a harbinger of doom? Was Lata truly the thread holding us together, or just a fragile mask for the abyss? As the community's faith fractured, so did my resolve. But in the cracks, I glimpsed something else, the raw, absurd truth of our existence. We were all caught between hope and despair, between the ridiculous and the profound. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the joke worth telling. The night closed in, the distant howl of the wind carrying whispers of what was to come. I knew the next steps would be mine to write, no matter how uncertain the punchline. And so the story goes on, with laughter hanging precariously, like a threadbare banner in the wind, daring us all to believe that even in brokenness, there is a reason to smile. Marcus Vell's approach was as cold and inevitable as the creeping shadows that swallowed the horizon. I first heard of his latest move during a restless night, the kind where the wind seemed to carry whispers from the dead cities beyond our fragile enclave. Lena was pacing near the fire, her sharp features cast in flickering light, muscles taut as a drawn bow. "They're retightening the noose," she said, voice low but fierce. "Marcus has dispatched more of his enforcers to the outer limits. They're recutting off our supply lines and demanding we surrender our gatherings." I rubbed my tired eyes, the weight of the world settling heavier than usual on my shoulders. "Control through silence," I muttered, the phrase slipping out like a punchline too dark for any audience. Guess he's aiming for a world where nobody dares laugh at the absurdity anymore. Lena shot me a look that balanced exhaustion with steel. "We can't let that happen." The next day, word came from Elliot, our ever-nervous tinkerer who had been poring over my jokes like they were sacred texts. He insisted there was a pattern, a prophetic thread woven through my humor that could warn us of Marcus's next move. I'd laughed it off at first, but the unease in his eyes made me pause. In the communal hall, Elliot laid out his findings to a skeptical crowd. "This isn't just comedy," he said, voice trembling slightly as he adjusted his smudged glasses, Max's punchlines. "They echo events to come. It's as if laughter itself is a language of fate." The room was thick with doubt and curiosity. Lena shot me a glance that said, "What now, philosopher?" As the sun dipped below the ruined skyline, a chilling message arrived. Marcus Vell himself was coming. His black, cloaked enforcers marched at the community's edge, a silent army poised to snuff out the fragile light of humor that held us together. I stepped forward, my voice dripping with the sarcasm that had become both my armor and my weapon. "Well, Marcus," I called out, ready to see if laughter really is the last defense against the end of the world. The air crackled with tension as the two forces faced off under the bruised sky. This was no longer a battle of words or jokes, it was a clash of ideologies, a fight for the soul of what remained of humanity. And in that moment, I realized that the final joke might just be the one that saves us all or the one that breaks us forever. But then again, isn't every joke a gamble? Some land with a roar, others fall flat, and a rare few, echo forever. As Marcus's cold eyes met mine, I braced myself for the punchline. I never thought a child could be the light in a world so thoroughly drowned in ash. But then Tilly came along, a wiry little thing with sandy hair always falling into her wide, curious eyes, and the sort of smile that looked like it was stitched from pure, stubborn hope. She was the orphan none of us had the heart to turn away. The one who laughed at my jokes, even when I delivered them like a man convinced the punchline was the last desperate gasp of a dying universe. That evening, I was curled up near the fire, the orange flames licking at the cold, blackened earth. And the weight of the world was pressing down on my chest like a lead blanket. Cynicism had become my default setting, a shield against the pointless tragedy surrounding us. The ruins whispered stories of what had been lost, and my jokes felt like brittle echoes of a past life. Tilly shuffled up beside me, her small frame illuminated by the flickering light. She tilted her head, her mouth quirking into a crooked smile that was all innocence and mischief. "Hey Max," she said, voice soft but earnest, "why do you think the apocalypse is the worst time for fashion?" "Because everyone's just dying to wear black." I blinked, surprised by the simplicity of the joke and the way it landed, not with derision but with a gentle warmth that seeped into my bones. For a moment, the weight lifted, replaced by something fragile and curious laughter. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that humor wasn't just a weapon or a distraction. It was a lifeline. In the days that followed, Tilly became a fixture at the heart of our ragtag community. She gathered the children, a motley crew of scraped knees and hopeful eyes, and led them in mimicking my jokes, their laughter rising like birdsong amidst the wreckage. Their joy was infectious, and even the hardened survivors found themselves smiling, their faces softening, as if touched by a balm they hadn't realized they needed. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting where despair threatened to smother our fragile unity, I found myself sitting with Lena beneath the pale glow of a makeshift lantern. The air was thick with exhaustion and unspoken fears. Lena's eyes, sharp and steady, met mine as she spoke in that calm, pragmatic tone I'd come to rely on. "Max, Tilly reminds us what we were fighting for," she said gently. "Not just survival, but the chance to laugh, to hope, to be human again. Don't let your cynicism drown out that light." Her words settled in the quiet spaces between us, a challenge wrapped in compassion. And I realized she was right. Leadership wasn't just about steering through the darkness. It was about holding the flicker of light steady, even when it seemed too dim to matter. The turning point came unexpectedly. In a community meeting thick with tension, voices rising in fear and frustration, Tilly, small but resolute, raised her hand. When called upon, she asked plainly, "Why does laughter matter if everything's so broken?" Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The question hung in the air, simple yet profound, and it pierced through the noise of doubt and despair. Faces softened. Eyes that had been hard with worry glistened with something new, reverence, perhaps, or the faintest spark of hope. That moment, more than any joke or speech, reminded me that the true power of humor wasn't just in the punchline, but in its ability to bind us together, to remind us that even in the darkest times, we are still human. Tilly's light didn't just illuminate the shadows, it challenged us to walk forward, laughter as our reluctant guide. So here we stand, a community stitched together by cracked jokes and fragile dreams, with a child's innocent questions steering us toward a future we barely dare to imagine. In the echoes of her laughter, I find a reason to carry on, to be more than just the last comedian, but the reluctant prophet of a new dawn. The world may still be broken, but with Tilly's light leading the way, maybe the last laugh isn't the end, it's the beginning. And if that's true, then perhaps hope isn't so fragile after all. Just wait until you hear what she's got lined up for the next apocalypse joke. The dawn crept over the horizon like a reluctant guest, spilling golden light unevenly across the ragged edges of our makeshift community. From my vantage point atop a stack of rusted crates, I could see the silhouettes of tents and lean-tos stitched together from whatever scraps survived the collapse. The air was thick with the scent of dust, and the faint tang of burnt wood reminders that this place, this fragile cluster of humanity, was perched precariously on the edge of oblivion. Lena stood beside me, her arms crossed tight against the chill morning breeze. Short black hair framed her strong features, and the glint of determination in her eyes cut sharper than the cold. "We can't keep flying by the seat of our pants, Max," she said, voice low but firm. "People need rules, structure. Otherwise this whole thing falls apart." I snorted, the sound rough and dry in my throat. "Structure? You mean like the silence's kind of structure?" I gestured vaguely, the ruins beyond whispering of the shadowy figures who sought to snuff out every spark of joy. Because last I checked, their idea of order involves black cloaks and crushing hope under boot heels. Her gaze didn't waver. "No, Max, not like that. But we need boundaries before chaos swallows us whole. Humor is a shield, yes, but it can't be the entire fortress." The weight of her words settled between us as the community below stirred awake, a chorus of clattering metal and hushed voices. Lena's pragmatism had always been the anchor to my drifting cynicism, but lately, that anchor had started to feel like a chain. Later that day, we found ourselves in the cramped community hall, a battered structure cobbled together from corrugated metal and salvaged wood. The room smelled of sweat and hope, the air thick with the tension of too many unspoken fears. "You can't just toss out rules like punchlines," I said, pacing with restless energy. "People need to laugh. Lena, they need chaos, unpredictability, otherwise, what's left?" She folded her arms, lips pressed into a thin line. "And they need to survive, Max. That's the point." Our voices grew louder, a clash of ideals rather than anger. Somewhere beneath the surface, respect hummed a fragile thread binding us despite the friction. Elliot Crane shuffled in, his glasses perpetually smudged, cheeks flushed from nervous exertion. Clutched in his hands was a tattered notebook filled with scrawled notes and diagrams. I think Max's joke from yesterday," he began hesitantly. "It might be more than just a joke. It could be a prophecy." Lena raised an eyebrow, skepticism plain on her face. "A prophecy?" Elliot nodded fervently. "Look here," he said, flipping to a page where Max's words were dissected like sacred scripture. "If we follow this, it could guide us through the coming storm." Lena tapped her fingers on the table, eyes flickering between the pages and the anxious man before her. "Or it could be coincidence," she said finally. "We can't base everything on riddles and half-truths." The conversation spiraled into philosophical debate, the room thick with uncertainty. The community's fragile fabric stretched taut between hope and doubt, order and chaos. As night fell, I caught Lena alone by the firelight, the flickering flames casting shadows that danced like ghosts across her face. She stared into the embers, a heaviness in her eyes that betrayed the resolute exterior she wore by day. "You ever feel like you reholding the whole world on your shoulders?" I asked quietly, settling beside her. She sighed, the sound raw and wary. "Every damn day. But if I don't, who will?" I wanted to tell her that laughter could be a weapon strong enough to carve new paths through the darkness, but the words felt hollow in the face of her struggle. "Maybe," I said instead, "the answer isn't one or the other. Maybe it's both." She looked at me then, a flicker of something like hope, or perhaps desperation in her eyes. "Maybe," she whispered. And in that fragile moment between night and dawn, between order and chaos, I realized that Lena's dilemma, was the dilemma of us all. The question wasn't whether to choose laughter or discipline, but how to weave them together into a tapestry strong enough to hold the shattered remnants of our world. Because in the end, survival wasn't just about rules or jokes. It was about finding balance between fear and hope, control and freedom, despair and the stubborn, irrepressible human spirit that refused to be silenced. And so we stood there, two souls caught in the same uncertain dance, knowing that whatever came next, it would be shaped by the delicate tension of our choices. The fire crackled, a beacon in the dark. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the ruins, carrying promises and threats alike. Lena's dilemma was far from solved, but the night had passed, and dawn was coming, and with it, the chance to try again. "You ready for another day of chaos and order?" I asked, a wry smile tugging at my lips. She returned the smile, faint but real. "Ready as I'll ever be." And that, I thought, was enough for now. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: in this broken world, we needed each other. Rules to keep us safe, laughter to keep us human, and the courage to walk the razor's edge between them. Because sometimes, the hardest jokes to tell are the ones about ourselves, and sometimes, those are the only jokes worth telling. As the first light of day spilled into the room, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders anew, heavy, yes, but strangely invigorating. The show wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But then again, in a world like this, who could ever be truly ready? Only time, and maybe a few good punchlines, would tell. And so the dance continued, with laughter and order entwined in a fragile embrace, each step a gamble, each breath a prayer, each joke a lifeline. Because in the end, that's all any of us had: the stories we told, the laughter we shared, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to carry us through the darkness. The night was far from over, but the dawn was breaking, and with it came the promise of another chance to get it right, or to fail spectacularly trying. Either way, I was here for it, and so was Lena, and somehow that was everything. Elliot had always been a curious sort, the kind of person who saw the cracks in the world not just as damage but as secret passageways to hidden meanings. That evening, beneath the skeletal remains of a crumbled building, he gathered a small crowd around a flickering candle, its sputtering flame casting dancing shadows on faces etched with exhaustion and hope. Papers, scraps of pre-apocalypse newspapers, and scrawled notes lay strewn across the makeshift table where Elliot leaned forward, eyes bright behind greasy glasses. "Look here," he said, tapping a particular phrase Max had muttered during his last joke. "There's a pattern, see? It's not just nonsense. It's a cryptic map, a guide wrapped in laughter." The survivors exchanged uncertain glances. To some it was a fascinating puzzle. To others, a dangerous flirtation with superstition. Max watched quietly from the back, his usual sardonic smile replaced with a furrowed brow. He had made jokes to shield the group from despair, not to become a prophet of some cryptic scripture. Yet, as Elliot's interpretations gained traction, Max felt his role slipping beyond entertainer into something heavier, something he hadn't asked for. Lena approached him quietly after the gathering. "Max," she said, her voice low but urgent, "this mysticism around your jokes, it could save us, or it could tear us apart. You need to think about how this shapes us." Max sighed, rubbing the back of his neck beneath his tangled hair. "I just wanted them to laugh, Lena, not to follow some divine punchline." Meanwhile, Joan Jokes Harris, ever the skeptic and rival, seized the moment in a subsequent community meeting. "So now we all prophets because we chuckled. Next thing you know, they'll be building altars to punchlines." Her sharp wit drew reluctant laughter, easing the tension but also spotlighting the growing rift. The community was at a crossroads between embracing the absurdity of survival through humor and succumbing to the very dogmas they had fought to avoid. Max felt the weight of their eyes, the fragile hope hanging in the balance. Could laughter sustain them if it became untouchable? Or would it suffocate under the weight of expectation? As the night deepened, Max found himself wandering the ruins alone, the echo of Elliot's words mingling with the distant murmurs of his community, hopeful, fearful, divided. Somewhere in the silence, a new joke formed in the recesses of his mind, waiting for the right moment to be told, to heal, or perhaps to shatter. And in that moment, Max understood that the true challenge was not in making them laugh, but in ensuring that laughter remained free, wild, imperfect, and dangerously human. The sun would rise soon, and with it, new questions, new jokes, and the unsteady promise of another day. But for now, the punchline was still unwritten.